this story needs no introduction. Except maybe this one. This is easily the most important story I have talked about in the channel so far. Genesis of the Daleks is one of those legendary stories that most classic fans already know and already appreciate. So let's go and talk about the Dalek creator Terry Nation just for a little bit. So after Dalek Mania in the 1960s died down, so did the Daleks in their appearances. Eventually, they came back, and the next Dalek story also brought back their main writer. Now, Nation wrote Planet of the Daleks and Death to the Daleks, and let's say they aren't the most popular stories in the show's history, as they mainly retreaded main plot points and ideas from previous Dalek stories. So when he was commissioned again under producer Barry Letts and script editor Terrence Dix, they denied the script as it was too similar to other ones. So Barry Letts politely requested to focus on the Genesis of the Daleks, which eventually became the name of the script, as it was moved on to the next production team. So, Genesis of the Daleks was released in 6 parts between the 8th of March 1975 to the 12th of April 1975. Thanks to script editor Robert Holmes's hatred towards 6-parters, this is the only 6-parter of season 12, starting a new trend of 1 6-parter per season, which was previously 3. This story is also produced by Philip Hinchcliffe and directed by David Maloney. So, jumping into episode 1, we see a quick battle scene as the Doctor is transmatted onto this war-torn planet, which is just a quarry, of course. But he is here alone as he sees a Time Lord behind him. Now, this Time Lord's appearance is one of my favourites of the race, as this is before their lore got more fleshed out, and it kind of got rid of their godlike powers and mysteriousness in previous stories. So this Time Lord has taken the Doctor and eventually his companions Harry and Sarah Jane out of time mid-transmat from the Nerva Beacon to the planet Skaro, before the creation of the Daleks, of course. This is because the Time Lord has perceived a time where the whole universe is ruled by the Daleks. So, this unknown Time Lord is tasking the Doctor to either do one of 3 things. Either prevent their creation, affect them so they'll evolve into less harmful creatures, or find a weakness. He also gives the Doctor a time ring that, when it is held properly, it will send the travellers back to their own time. He then disappears as the companions appear nearby. So thanks to this Time Lord's interference in time, this has now been retconned as the official start of the last great Time War, which of course predates the modern series, as the Time Lords strike first by affecting the Daleks' initial development. Speaking of that early development, this story retcons 2 important things that were established in the Daleks' brief origin in their first appearance. In that story, there were 2 creatures, being the Thals and the Dals, and they got into a war, so the Dals hid in metal shells to survive the radiation, and became Daleks. In this story, the war is between the Thals and the Khalids, which is an obvious anagram of the word Dalek. So the identity of the mysterious Dals has now been kind of erased, and also hasn't been fully explained in the proper lore. That they were creatures that the Khalids evolved out of, or they are just another name for the Dalek squids, but this retcon doesn't really matter that much. The other retcon is that in their first appearance, being the Daleks, they were extremely xenophobic and hid in their own city with more primitive silver shells, and also they were confined just to the city. But in this story, the Daleks are gunmetal grey like the other 70 stories, and they have rectangular slats which are designed to maneuver over tough terrain, which first properly appeared in The Chase. But thanks to the events at the end of the story, it is theorised that the Daleks have devolved before their first appearance. Anyway, we watch as the 3 travellers traverse the rocky terrain where the Doctor accidentally steps on a landmine. Now, this idea has now been robbed by Stephen Moffat for the 15th Doctor story, Boom. But this is a quick scene where Harry helps the Doctor off it without the landmine exploding. This landmine scene is the first giveaway that this is definitely a more violent story, as later on, the TARDIS team comes across a Khalid trench with dead bodies propped up to look like they're more alive. which is extremely dark for a Doctor Who story as well. Also, this story is a main example of the infamous Mary Whitehouse in a campaign to end Doctor Who, as it was way too violent for children, but I won't get into it as there's another story where her campaign hits its peak. Anyway, the Doctor also points out that the Khalids have old-fashioned guns and not futuristic ones, meaning that this war had caused both sides to devolve to more primitive weapons, which also supports the theory that the Daleks will devolve. But then some Thals ambush the heroes, and the Doctor and Harry are saved by the Khalids, and Sarah Jane is presumed dead. When brought in, they're sent to the higher-ups for interrogation, as there are too intelligent to be Mutos. So, Mutos are this third race, which are actually mutated Thals and Khalids, who have been affected by the war, and sent out to the radioactive wasteland, where they attack at night. Harry and the Doctor meet the youthful General Raven, who is actually the complete opposite than you'd think, as he is a patriotic and merciless man who is extremely loyal to the Khalids. We also learn that the two races have hid themselves in domes for survival, where the higher-ups are hiding, sending young soldiers in for a fight. In this scene, Raven has an excellent speech, showing how devoted he is.
I do beg your pardon.
When victory is ours, we'll wipe every trace of the Thals and their city from the face of this land. We will avenge the deaths of all Khalids who've fallen in the cause of right and justice, and build a peace which will be a monument to their sacrifice. Our battle cry will be total extermination of the Thals!
Now, obviously, this is 100% confirmation for the two people in the audience who didn't know that they'll become Daleks, but this also shows the Nazi roots of the Khalids. Now, the Daleks are obviously based on Nazis, and that's why the Khalids are basically wearing Nazi uniforms. From the all-black suits, to the white band with their insignia on their arm, to the Hitler-like salutes, to even the Iron Cross on someone. Now, that someone is Security Commander Nida, and what a performance he is, as he is simply one of the coolest characters here, and he gets a lot of scenes with the main villains, who I'll talk about very shortly. But after an attempted escape by the Doctor and Harry to the surface, and even falling on a tripwire, they get caught again, where they're sent to the scientific bunker, which is detached from the Khalid Dome/city, and it is being led by the villain from earlier. So let's rewind back to Sarah Jane, who is actually alive. So she explores the wastelands of Skaro, where she sees some Mutos following her. So she runs to this small part of infrastructure where she sees a Dalek getting tested on its target practice by Chief Scientist Davros and the Khalid scientist Garmin, for the episode 1 cliffhanger. Now let's finally talk about the villain of the story being Davros. Now Davros is easily the star of the show here, and he is sort of the main character in this story, if you ignore our regulars of course, because it all revolves around him, and he is the creator of the Daleks, obviously. So Davros is a Khalid who is terribly injured by a Thal bombardment, where he is bound to a mobility unit, which acts as his life support system, which eventually becomes the inspiration for the Daleks' mobility system. He also has one arm being his right, and his torso and his eyes are visibly destroyed, but it has been revealed that he has his eyes, but they're too painful to use. So instead he has one blue eye, which of course inspires the Dalek's eye stalk. He has a robotic voice and blackened teeth to show his scarier side. All of this information I have just said, by the way, is never explained on screen and is fully implied, as expanded media has filled in the gaps, so the audience just has to fill in the gaps themselves. And I wouldn't be surprised if some members confuse him for some strange alien. He is played brilliantly by Dalek voice actor Michael Wisher, and his prosthetics are simply amazing. And don't forget that his performance is instantly memorable. For a disabled villain who is physically weaker than everybody else in the story, he is so bloody terrifying and threatening, and he has so much power with him. And just the way he can snap at people and go full on Dalek mode is just so sinister. Now, this is his first appearance in the show, and unfortunately, it is his best appearance, as he's infamous for being able to cheat death, and always appearing when he doesn't really need to. I will get into his fate at the end later, but I find it super annoying he was brought back, as he isn't really needed in subsequent Dalek stories because of his completed character arc. But yeah, it is kind of impossible to think about this story without thinking about Davros. Now, obviously, this is a Dalek story, so I have to talk about the titular villain. Well, basically, they're not in this story for much of it, as it mainly explains about their development and their creation. So, they are less involved in this story, until the final episodes, of course. So for episode 2, a couple things happen. Firstly, Sarah gets cornered by some mutos, but one of them defends her, and his name is Severin. Now, he and Sarah soon get captured by Thals, where they are sent into slave labour, where they are forced to build a rocket for them, to destroy the Khaled Dome. We learn from a Khaled prisoner that they are forced to use dystronic explosives to load the rocket with, and since they are radioactive, they can give people in close proximity dystronic toxemia, where they are basically poisoned into death. This one prisoner also says that the Khaled Dome was built to be impenetrable, unless the right formula is used, but the Thals don't know this yet. I will like to say that I really enjoy that the story doesn't have any proper heroes in it. Usually, the Thals are shown as a peace-loving race who are hunted down by the Daleks because of this feud. But in this story, the Thals are no better than the Khaleds, which presents this war as much more realistic, and it makes the story far more intense, as the TARDIS team doesn't really have any safe areas to be in. Speaking of which, the Doctor and Harry are brought into the scientific bunker, where they have their belongings taken and are interrogated by Khaled scientist Ronson. Now, Ronson is a much more kind Khaled compared to Nyder and Davros, so he listens and understands the Doctor's story of being an alien. Then we see Davros enter with a Dalek, to present it to the scientists. During the scene, this is where I first properly appreciate the music of this episode, and it is really cool. Now, I haven't really been mentioning the music of these stories, but since they use multiple composers, it's kind of hard to talk about the music. But this story is composed by Dudley Simpson, who is a regular composer of the classic show. And wow, it is really good. It seems like the Dalek version of the Star Wars Imperial March, but this was made 5 years before Empire Strikes Back came out, which is really, really interesting. Anyway, Davros presents the Dalek as a Mark III travel machine, but he later announces the name off-screen to the scientists, and this is where we learn what is inside is the estimated final evolution of the Khaled race, and that Davros is created by genetically modifying Khaleds. Then, the Dalek is equipped with its ray gun, and it is activated on automatic control. It instantly recognizes the Doctor and Harry as aliens, and wants them exterminated. When this happens.
Exterminate! No! You dare to interfere. You have the audacity to interrupt one of my experiments.
But it would have destroyed him.
So you think the saving of a worthless life more important than the progress we have made? My creature showed a natural desire, an instinct to destroy, and you interceded! You will be punished for this!
This is the first time we see Davros shout at someone, and he instantly carries the scene. And this is where we realise how much influence he truly has. After this, the Doctor and Harry are put into cells as Ronson secretly talks to them, saying that the Doctor was right about the Mark III travel machines, and they would be called Daleks. Ronson then decides to break them out, so that he can sneak them through ventilation to the Khaled city to convince higher-ups to stop Davros' experiments. Before they leave, Ronson shows the Doctor and Harry the incubator room, with all little Dalek/Khaled mutants developing inside, and this location will become extremely important for the ending of the story. The Doctor and Harry sneak through the vents, and they are warned that Davros' past experiments are on the other side. Now, going back to Sarah Jane, she and the other prisoners decide they want to escape the Thals, as they know they're going to die from dystronic toxemia. So, they all try to escape by climbing the scaffolding to the top of the rocket, to an escape hatch above. During their escape, the Thals catch them, and they begin to open fire as the prisoners climb, and one by one, someone gets shot and falls. After a while, it is just Sarah and Severin, as they are nearly at the top. But for the iconic Episode 2 cliffhanger, Sarah loses her grip for her to fall, and I believe the series' first freeze-frame cliffhanger. Now, if I had to pick a weakest episode of the story, it would be Part 3, as it is the most padded, but it is still very important for the story. So the cliffhanger from the previous episode is completely erased, as she only falls down a couple of feet, so she just climbs back up to the top of the rocket with Severin. But unfortunately for them, The Thals have climbed up too and re-arrest them, and one of these guards does this to Sarah.
If I should just slacken my grip. They say people who fall from great heights are dead before they hit the ground. I don't believe that, do you?
This is why I love this story. Simple, frightening scenes like this are always effective and extremely fun to watch. So going back to the Doctor and Harry, they're in a cave with Davros's previous experiments, as they travel to the Khalid Dome, but on the way, Harry gets his foot stuck in this living clamshell thing, where the Doctor has to use a rock to pry it open to free him, where Harry says this line.
There's some bruises though, Harry.
Why is it always me that puts a foot in it?
What a very self-aware line made by him, which really annoys me as I don't like when they make him seem like an idiot. So after that obstacle, they arrive to the Khalid Dome, explaining that the Daleks to the higher-ups. But, unfortunately, they can't immediately take action, as they have a lack of evidence, so they're going to do an investigation on him. As this happens, the Doctor and Harry are told that there's service shafts at the Khalid Dome, so they can reach the Thal Dome to find Sarah. Now this is a major criticism of the story for me, because having these two cities in walking distance from each other just makes the world much smaller, and this makes it really confusing, as why can't the Khalids just send troops down here and invade the Thal Dome from the inside out? Anyway, the Doctor and Harry travel through these shafts and reach the Thal Dome, where they overhear a meeting between the Thal higher-ups and Davros and Nida. Basically, the Khalids want to halt Davros's experiments, and since this risks of the Dalek project being closed, which to him is the only possible future for the Khalids to have, he is meeting with the Thals and giving them the formula to destroy the outer Khalid Dome, which when the rocket is launched will destroy the entire city. So, as this quick turn of events happen, the Doctor and Harry break into where the rocket is and save Sarah and Severin. And the Doctor orders Harry to lead them back into the Khalid Dome, as he will disarm the rocket. But during this, a barely conscious guard is able to flick a switch, causing the Doctor to get electrocuted by the scaffolding railing for the cliffhanger. The next episode begins with a quite underrated scene, as the Doctor wakes up from being unconscious to watch the Khalid city in ruins, which is where he sent Sarah and Harry to, and because of this, the Thals free him, because they believe the war is over, and they want to change their ways. This is just really tragic if you think about it. The Doctor just set his friends off to their deaths, and he couldn't do anything about it. But during the celebration, freshly made Daleks invade the city and begin exterminating the people inside. Now I don't know if this is on purpose, but I like that the Dalek guns seem to be a bit weaker, as it takes multiple shots to kill people, showing that they still need to be upgraded. During this attack, the Doctor runs into Betten, a Thal woman who has no idea what is going on, so he protects her and leads her out of the building, to where we see this awesome shot of a Dalek looking overhead with these beautiful colours in the background. Now the Doctor tells Betten that she needs to gather survivors and begin a resistance against the Daleks, to help his cause destroy the Daleks early on. One more thing is that Betten has now been retconned by Stephen Moffat, that when Clara jumps into the Doctor's time stream in The Name of the Doctor, she gets rewritten by a Clara splinter, meaning that she's kind of been erased from history. Anyway, the Doctor continues to go through the caves where he is attacked by Mutos, but to his surprise, Sarah, Harry and Severin save him from dying. They reveal that they got attacked on the way, and when the city was destroyed, they knew they had to go back. The Doctor also says to Severin to get as many good Mutos to join with Betten in their resistance. And finally, reunited, the TARDIS crew go to the service vents to finally stop Davros. Speaking of Davros, let's rewind to see what he's been doing so far. So he just returned to the bunker, and he has a series of complex emotions as he just killed his own kind for the future of the Daleks. And with his anger, he blames it all on Ronson where this happens to him.
Exterminate! Exterminate!
No!
Exterminate!
No! No!
Today, the Khalid race is ended, consumed in a fire of war, but from its ashes will rise a new race, the supreme creature, the ultimate conqueror of the universe, the Dalek!
After this, he orders his assistant Garmin to change the Daleks' genetic structure so they are devoid of any conscience, morality, or pity. And this leads Garmin to develop rebellious thoughts as he begins to gossip to other Khalid scientists, but Nida is overhearing them. But in a strange turn of events, he has the same thoughts and wants to join in with the conversation. And he wants to meet Garmin privately later. They eventually meet and Garmin spills his plans to him as well as all the rebels who are with him, and Nida double-crosses him, leading to Davros to emerge and announcing that all other conspirators will be killed and he will be arrested, and he wants to rewire his brain to fix the stupid emotions. Anyways, the TARDIS team are quite loud when they come out of the other side and get caught immediately, to where the Doctor's being interrogated, and Davros orders for him to explain every Dalek defeat from the future so he can improve them. Obviously, the Doctor refuses, so Davros decides to bring in Harry and Sarah by hooking them up to a machine, where if the Doctor lies, a strong electrical current will kill them, for the Part 4 cliffhanger. Now, the penultimate episode begins with the Doctor betraying the future by revealing all Dalek defeats. For some reason, one of them is an invasion of Earth in the year 2000, where the Daleks wanted to control the Earth's core, which is very similar to the story The Dalek Invasion of Earth. But I think Terry Nation meant to write the year 2167 instead of 2000. Anyway, Davros wants to talk to the Doctor alone, so the companions are sent to the cell with Garmin, where a Khalid rebel overpowers the guard and breaks them out. Meanwhile, Davros chats to the Doctor, not as enemies but as scientists, arguing the ethics on the Daleks, and how the Doctor sees them as pure evil beings, and Davros seeing them as good beings that will unite the universe under their rule and wars will end. This is one of many philosophical moments in the story, on whether the Daleks are truly meant to be made for good, not evil, but the Doctor finds out Davros' true morals when he asks him this question, where if Davros hypothetically had a virus that he created, which is extremely contagious and kills everything on contact, destroying all other forms of life, will he ever allow its use? And this is Davros' reply to it.
It is an interesting conjecture.
Would you do it?
The only living thing. A microscopic organism. Reigning supreme. A fascinating idea.
But would you do it?
Yes. Yes. To hold in my hand a capsule that contained such power. To know that life and death on such a scale was my choice. To know that the tiny pressure on my thumb, enough to break the glass, would end everything. Yes. I would do it. That power would set me up above the gods. And through the Daleks, I shall have that power!
This scene just proves why Davros is irredeemable, and why he is pure evil, and even when the Doctor grabs his arm and orders to stop all Dalek production or he'll turn off his life support system, Nida comes in and apprehends the Doctor and begins to put him back into his cell, just showing still that he has power, even when weak. But on the way to the cell, Harry dresses as a guard and saves the Doctor, and they help Garmin to start a revolution with as many scientists as possible, as they break into gun lockers and begin to overpower Davros and Nida. The revolutionaries order for a vote, where if the majority say so, Davros will be stripped of power and the Daleks will be ended. As this happens, the TARDIS team find explosives and new clothes for Sarah to wear in a locker, so they begin to set them up in the incubator room. But as this happens, the cliffhanger is that a Dalek mutant strangles the Doctor for the final cliffhanger of the story. Now we are finally on to part 6, which is considered not only the best part of the story, but the best individual episode of the entire classic series, as it has a 9.1 out of 10 on IMDb. So Harry and Sarah wrestle the mutant off the Doctor's head, where we go to the most iconic scene of the entire story, being...
What are you waiting for?
Just touch these two strands together, and the Daleks are finished. Have I that right?
To destroy the Daleks, you can't doubt it.
But I do. You see, some things could be better with the Daleks. Many future worlds will become allies just because of their fear of the Daleks.
It isn't like that.
But the final responsibility is mine. Mine alone. Listen. If someone who knew the future pointed out a child to you and told you that that child would grow up totally evil, to be a ruthless dictator who would destroy millions of lives, could you then kill that child?
We're talking about the Daleks, the most evil creatures ever invented. You must destroy them. You must complete your mission for the Time Lords.
Do I have the right?
Now, I am sorry I can't play this full clip, and that other clips are cropped like this, as I want to avoid copyright as much as possible. But this is the best the classic show has for a morality question. Now, the most obvious answer would be to put the wires together and destroy them. But as the Doctor says, this is genocide, and that makes him no better than the Daleks. This, for me, is the peak of Tom Baker's performance as the Doctor. Before he can make his decision, Garmin interrupts to say that Davros has agreed to the revolutionists' terms. They all dismantle the explosives, changing history forever. Sort of. So Davros asks the remaining Khalid scientists on whether they are loyal to him, and a couple do stand up and join his side. But it is obvious he is stalling for time, as he is waiting for the Daleks to return from the Thal Dome. As this happens, Sarah Jane finds the Doctor's belongings and the time ring. They all need to do is destroy the tapes with the future Dalek defeats recorded onto. They all see Nyder trying to flee the scene, but during this scuffle, the Doctor accidentally drops the time ring and doesn't notice, and when they capture Nyder, he escorts them to Davros' office, where he opens the safe revealing the tapes. As the heroes destroy the tapes with a Dalek gun fittingly, Nyder locks them in, but unfortunately, they can't go right now as they don't have the time ring. But they do see a screen of what's going on with Davros, and we see the Daleks return and exterminate the traitors, including Garmin. Luckily for our heroes, they are saved by Severin, who has gone to get them as Betten and other survivors have the bunker surrounded and they're ready to destroy the outside, locking out anybody who's in it. But the Doctor uses this time to grab the time ring and do something that I absolutely hate, rearming the explosives in the incubator room. Now, when he finishes, he doesn't put the wires together, as conveniently a Dalek runs over them, and acting as the conductor, detonates the bomb, destroying itself in the incubator room. When the Doctor narrowly escapes, and the outside of the bunker is destroyed, he reveals that he has only been able to delay the Daleks for 1,000 years, but there is a problem with this. His "do I have the right" speech acts like if this room is destroyed, the Daleks are done, but he's only able to delay them for 1,000 years, so what is the point of the speech? Now I get that it is more blood on his hands, but he still has to set up the explosives, and the Dalek accidentally sets them off, which still makes him responsible for any damage done. Now, the argued canon answer is that if he did it before, there might be a chance that Davros could be stopped before he stalls for the Daleks to return. And speaking of which, let's end this story off with their final moment, shall we? So Davros gets annoyed that the Daleks are starting an automatic production without his permission, so he orders Nyder to turn it off, but the Daleks shoot Nyder dead. Eventually they shoot the rest of the scientists dead as Davros begs for pity, as the scientists are innocent in this affair. But of course Davros deliberately ordered Garmin to change the genetic structure of them, so pity is not in their vocabulary. So Davros tries to self-detonate the bunker, where this amazing scene happens.
We are entombed, but we live on. This is only the beginning. We will prepare. We will grow stronger. When the time is right, we will emerge and take our rightful place as the supreme power of the universe!
This is personally my favourite scene of the story. Davros' death is so poetic, as he basically destroyed himself, and it annoys me to my core that Terry Nation decided to reveal in the next Dalek story that his life support put him in suspended animation, ruining his story arc. But this speech this Dalek says is so cool and threatening, and this is the reason why the Daleks are the coolest and most frightening Doctor Who monsters. It is because they are so real, making them remind us of a time of Nazism and how this can be a reality again in the modern day, which is so scary to me. Anyway, this speech is made by the Dalek who killed Davros, I think, and it now has been confirmed that this Dalek would eventually become the first Emperor of the Daleks. Like I said earlier in this review, the theory with the 1,000 years of zero development and the Daleks degrading themselves to a more primitive form for survival before learning to become strong again is very, very relevant when they are locked in at the end of the story. Speaking of which, the story actually ends with the Dr. Harry and Sarah Jane saying goodbye to everyone there and eventually holding the time ring to hopefully return to Nerva Beacon. And the Doctor has this quick speech while spinning around, explaining that the atrocities the Daleks cause will also cause other people to respond to these atrocities by being good. Now, this is a very long review, and I want to keep my final thoughts quite short. This story is spectacular. There is no other story in the show's history to have this much respect and love towards it, as it is also the most repeated Doctor Who story ever, meaning that most fans have already watched it and love it. For our regular cast, Sarah and Harry don't do that much, but their presence is there enough to really solidify the dark themes and the violent atmosphere. But Tom Baker's performance as the Doctor is simply unmatched in this story. If it hadn't been clear yet, the majority of British homes loved him at this point. And may I remind you, this is only his 4th serial in the role. Now, this was actually the last of the season to be filled, but I'll get into more of that when we talk about Revenge of the Cybermen next time. But for me, the real highlight of the story is 100% Davros. His amazing performance and relationship with Nyder and the Doctor just works so well for a story like this. He is one of the first Hinchcliffe villains to be mostly pure evil, but I do like the subtle good side to him. Originally, the Daleks were made for survival of the Khalid race, but his anger of war and his distaste to the Thals make him evolve these creatures to outgrow his strength, and it ends with his defeat. Again, the Daleks don't do that much because it is about their development and their genesis as creatures, but they steal every scene that they're in, and this is their peak for characterization. Now, I still believe that the Ark in Space is a better jumping on point for this Doctor, and the show in general, but this story is a great early recommendation for those who haven't seen it. That is why I give Genesis of the Daleks a 10 out of 10. Thanks for watching.